to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Davis?
Here.
Mrs. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Bendel?
Here.
Mrs. Heck?
Here.
Mrs. Medina?
Here.
Mr. Krings?
Here.
Mrs. Royal?
Here.
Thank you, Maureen. Student representatives report. Desiree's not here. Do you have anything as well?
Nothing was forwarded to me.
No.
Okay, so maybe she's up. Okay. Move on to the minutes.
Okay, I would make a motion that the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of January 15th and the special Board of Education meeting closed session of January 17th be approved as printed.
Second.
Is it the 14th or the 15th? I want to say the 14th.
Says
15th on here.
Yeah,
but-
here it says 15th, but the minutes are the 14th.
It's the 14th.
14th?
14th, yeah.
Okay, change.
I second the correction of the first.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of January 14th and the special Board of Education meeting closed session minutes of January 17th, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Comments from citizens and delegations? We have Thank you. Move on to committee reports. John, Business Services.
John, we did meet on February 4th. Our meeting started at 6 o'clock and we had no public comment. Out of our meeting, we have one consent agenda item. And that is for a purchase of a 44-month purchase of Securely, which is a software that allows us to filter every device that we have, basically. So with our one-to-one initiative at Rams almost complete and within the next year, Lincoln being complete, the software is for the ability to protect what if they take it home, that it limits what they can view. And it's like it's similar to Gaggle with our email account. We can, if we're talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about, such as maybe suicide or anything like that, it reports back so that we know what's going on and that the information is passed back to the admin and to the district. It's a actual 44-month period. It's like a 3-year period, but we're getting 6 months free is basically what we were told by Philip. And the cost is $41,962, and it's actually going to be paid in 3 installments of $13,987.60. The funding comes from the technology budget. So the committee recommends, and I move the motion to purchase the Securely Anywhere filtering from Securely at a cost of $41,962.80 to be paid in 3 installments of $13,987.6 with funding from the district technology budget.
Okay, we have motion second to approve BS1. You got roll call on that, please?
Mrs. Heck?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Royal?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the balance of our reports, we had our invoices from the city of Wisconsin Rapids for the police liaison officer and also salt purchases that we did for our district. Then we talked about power distributors. There was a technology education equipment, and that is actually, if you were reading the minutes, it was kind of confused what it was. We were too. It is actually small engines for our career tech and business, or our automotive, small engines automotive program, and that's what those are, is actual engines. And then the second part is technology education equipment, and that also wasn't necessarily billed as what it was. And that is, what was that again? Screen printing. Big screen printing machine for the arts department. And both of these were paid out of grants. They weren't paid out of the budget, they were paid out of grant money. One was from the Carl Perkins, and the other one was...
It's the grants that we receive for the kids who get the certification, you know, the ERIC reports on every year.
Yeah,
That money is...
the freshman group coming in, so we get the money for the technologies. So that was nice to know that that money isn't coming out of our budget necessarily, but it's grant money being used to good use for our students. And with that, I move and the committee recommends to accept the balance of our meeting minutes.
Second.
We have we have motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of the Business Service Committee of February 4th, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thanks for the report, John. We'll move on to personnel. Sandy.
Personnel Services met February 4th. Our meeting was called to order late at 6:01. And from that meeting, we have 7 consent agenda items, and they are as follows. 1, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 4 support staff appointments. 2, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 1 professional staff early retirement. 3, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 1 professional staff resignation. 4, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2 support staff resignations. 5, the committee recommends and I move to approve a 2-wage increase for confidential secretaries and district van drivers, excluding the administrative assistant to the superintendent board secretary position, retroactive to July 1st, 2018. 6, the committee recommends and I move to approve an hourly rate of $29 for the administrative assistant to the superintendent board secretary position effective July 1, 2018. 7th, the committee recommends and I move to approve a pay increase for food service substitutes as listed on the addendum effective March 1, 2019. And the increase is there 45 cents for these substitute rates. The head service cook will go to $12. The baker and second cook will go to $11.50, and the helper cashier will go to $11, and that's each getting us 45 cent per hour raise. Does anybody want anything held up?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve PS1 through PS7. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
And then we just had updates and reports, and when we look at our substitute teacher rate, what we're paying, we're very competitive. We don't have any problems there. And we look at our WRPS current substitute fill rate, we are usually in the 90s. We're doing really well even compared to other districts. So with that, I move that the minutes from the February 4th Personnel Services Committee be approved as printed.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of the Personnel Services Committee of February 4th, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thanks, Sandy. Move on to Educational Services.
Thanks, John. Educational Services Committee also met on February 4th, and we had no public comment. We have only one consent agenda item on the strategic plan for 2019 and 20. Craig Boren, our superintendent, along with Ed Allison, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Phil Bickelhop, Director of Technology, Elizabeth Severson, Director of Food Services, and Kathy Stevens-Hintz, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, reviewed proposed changes to the district's 2019-20 strategic plan. Some additions to the plan include developing a new technology replacement IT infrastructure plan, developing a plan for vacant or underutilized buildings, establishing connections with community mental health agencies to provide in-school service options, and combining objectives 3, 5, and 8 to represent best instructional practice in the areas of assessment, equity, and technology. I complimented the revised strategic plan and acknowledged the time staff spent developing it. So with that, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2019-20 Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools strategic plan.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ES1. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Then we went on to updates, and our first update was about Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Award. And Ms. Severson presented an update on the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program and funding the district is receiving in 2018-19 for this program. Grove, Howe, and Meade elementary schools are all receiving this award, and as a result, Meade is able to offer the snack every day, and Howe and Grove 3 days a week. Besides nutritional benefits, students are also tasting and learning about new foods and developing better eating habits. Then we went on to talk about the district wellness assessment, and Ms. Severston updated the committee on results of a spring 2018 survey the WRPS Wellness Committee asked staff to complete. A handout was shared and reviewed with the committee. Then we went on to concurrent enrollment courses. And Kathy Stebbins-Kintz explained how the UW system merger of 4- and 2-year college campuses is changing what concurrent enrollment courses may be offered at Lincoln High School. English 250 will no longer be an option for students. Other possible course additions will be reviewed through the CII process and would be brought to the committee in the future. With that, the committee recommends, and I make a motion to accept the remainder of the minutes of the Educational Services Committee.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of the Educational Service Committee meeting on February 4th, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. These minutes are approved. Thanks for the report, Ann. Move on to agenda referrals, information requests. Jessica, can you start?
We almost have it, but I think it's been resolved. Since we haven't had building improvements at Rams, I remember these because these were in when they originally built the school. This is what was there, a square toilet paper roll. If you try to get toilet paper off of that roll, it's a little tough. So I had a couple of people comment to me. They said, yeah, well, why can't we get better toilet paper rolls in the old part of the building since the new building has nice round ones? So I did a little bit of research, and while we were at convention, there was a conversation one night about this because that was there, and we were talking about it, and he said, no, really, they are square. And I said, well, yeah, I remember that, but I had thought they were all been replaced years ago. Obviously, they have. So if you're trying to figure this out, when you look at it, it is actually a square toilet paper holder, which you can't roll off of. However, there is repurposed use for this. You can mount it on the wall, and now you can hang your cords on it and lock them in place. Or you could put lawn chairs on it, or you could put ladders and whatever you need to do, which they were fantastic for. And the good news is I found out that all of the, don't think there was any of these at Lincoln, are there? It was just
I don't think so. I think
East
must have been
and-
the last one. Yeah,
Rams and East. I think they're here too. I think there's some here.
but not everywhere.
No.
The great toilet paper recession of the 60s.
So he said that way they were originally developed to use to save toilet paper use. And they probably did a very good job.
Because you can't get any off the roll.
Yeah, it is very tough to get it off the roll. I mean, you literally had to do it. So
You're going to go through all kinds of paper now.
yeah, you're gonna be all over the place.
We'd rather have them clean.
So this did not become a gender referral to business services because they have ordered new ones and these are being replaced.
In process, yeah.
So
Those are probably antique.
you literally cannot roll it up one like this and physically roll it
Well,
like this. Which when you only have 5 minutes between classes, it's pretty hard to do. So that was our levity of the day, really. But I couldn't believe that people had actually asked me questions about the toilet paper, and I assumed that I remember when I went at West, and nobody liked it, and everybody complained about them. But they said, well, they're new, we're not doing anything.
They're not due anymore.
They're not doing anymore. So that was almost the gender referral that we had. And it was resolved before we had to do that.
All right. Move on to the legislative agenda. We have this month, John.
We got a couple things. One, we had information on Tony Evers' budget, but it's very, his proposals for funding reform kind of follow what he was campaigning for fair funding for future. There's different things in here for shifts funding from school levy tax credit, the first dollar credit, high poverty aid, to the generalized equalization aid formula, provided an additional $506 million to state general equalization aids over the 1921 biennium, $190 million in 1920, $406 in the 2021, over the base of 2018-19. set a minimum aid level of 3,000 per full-time equivalent student for every student in the district, if that would include 4K. 5.8 million hold harmless and ensure that every school receives the same amount of total state support under the fair funding because there were districts complaining that they might be not get the funding or lose some of their funding, so that they didn't want it. They wanted to hold harmless every district, so that every district either stayed even or got some money without penalty. And then there was a lot of other things that are in there that weren't really fleshed out, and there's a lot of detail on that. There was a public hearing on Senate Bill 16. There's actually Senate Bill 15, 16, and 17, all of them to increase funding in Part 2 CTE. The Senate Bill 16 specifically increased grants by $3.5 million over the 2019-20 and 2021 fiscal years. The public hearing is actually this Wednesday, February 13th at 10:30 at 330 Southwest in the Capitol building. The Senate Bill 15, I'll just read it right from here, is relating to new internship grants and making appropriation. Senate Bill 16 relating to career and technical education incentive grants and making an appropriation. And then 17 is relating to workforce training grants for seminars in high-demand fields to teach new skills and provide micro-credentials and making an appropriation. On these, most of them are Senator Fain, Darling, and Peskin, co-sponsored by Representatives Ballweg, Gundrup, Culp, Novak, Grantham, Rodriguez, Gronkowski, Thiesenfeld, Richards, Zimmerman, and Tussle. Those are the senators and assembly people that are involved with these three bills. And then the last thing that they had is, I know we had talked about it in several other meetings about advocacy, and the February tip for advocacy is using school board resolutions effectively. And they had a list of some of these, and I'm going to give this to Marion so she can put it in the next packet, basically. It's different things that, because I know I know we had talked about having a workshop possibly and talking about some advocacy and goals for the board to advocate for. One of them is basically the list is Blue Ribbon Commission on funding, early college credit, fair funding, 4-year-old kindergarten funding, the governor's funding plan itself. I love my public schools week, K-12 collaboration, lead and drinking water, non-discrimination immigration status, preserving common school fund library aid, referendum restrictions, school start date, school safety, special education funding, voucher transparency, weapons possession in schools, community letters, sample letters and resolutions, and then boards have to make their joint finance committee. So those are some of the things that they recommend that we, as far as talking points for us as a school board to start talking to either legislators or making resolutions to the legislature so that WASB can take some of these forward as school board, as representatives of the school board when they go make their case for their advocating for us, to the legislature. And the last piece is that and this came out, and we'll probably talk about it a little more in our section about new business about the convention, but at the legislative agenda of Assembly, every motion that we put forward passed. There were a couple that had some multiple discussion items to do. Usually one or two words, and one of them was a felony. On the school safety, the word felony, a couple of other districts had already over that. And there was four different resolutions passed, or amendments to the resolution on that. And then there was one other one that had something about similar to a felony, but holding people accountable similar to a voluntary when they make threats on to people in school through Facebook about shooting up the school. Well, that is what I have.
All right, thanks for the report, Jeff. We'll move on to the bills.
Okay, I would make a motion that the receipts be noted and the bills be paid as printed.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that the receipts be noted and bills paid as printed. We have roll call, please, Ron?
Mr. Bumbo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayon?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Heck?
Yes. I just want to note, we had a little over $72,000 in focus on energy rebates. And if you look at some of the things, you can see that some of the things from the first safety grant that is being installed, there's quite a bit that's been done on that. If you look at it, it's 610, but it's being done.
Yes. In between plowing snow.
Okay, we move into new business. Item A, possible action on employee appointments, resignations, and retirement requests.
You should have a handout in front of you. Three individuals on there. We just recently hired Emmeline Ritchie, who will be working out a grant in the 4K program as a early childhood special education teacher. She spoke to her on Sunday. She had to line up an apartment, so she'll be starting in about 2 weeks after she's able to get everything moved over here, but she's excited for the position. We also had early retirement, Judy LeClaire, who teaches special ed over at Woodside, and also a special education aide at Woodside, retiring.
For reference to the addition of the early childhood teacher at Grant has to do with student numbers, and that position was added due to that need.
I'd make a motion to approve the one appointment, one staff, professional staff appointment, the one professional staff retirement, and the early support staff retirement.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the one professional staff appointment, the one professional staff early retirement, and the one support staff early retirement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'd just like to make a comment that I'm very sorry to see those two retirements because they are excellent, especially Mrs. Linda on the bottom, are just wonderful human beings who have helped my grandson greatly. So I'm sorry to see both of them go.
Fortunately, retirement takes good ones.
Yeah, always.
We do.
Okay. You have one other early retirement request?
We do. So there is also a request from Mr. Rod Henke, Associate Principal at Lincoln High School, after 28 years of service to Lincoln High School and Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools, to retire effective June 30th, 2019.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve the retirement request of Rod Hinkey effective June 30th, 2019.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the retirement request of Rodney Hinkey effective June 30, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, and then next item, discussion and possible action to approve second reading of the following board policies: 422, admission of non-resident pupils; 423.1, part-time open enrollment; 443.2, rule bus conduct; 453.4, rule medication administration procedures.
And those are all down for second reading, folks, as I indicated in your background information. They could have been on committee agendas, as has been past practice. Sometimes you'll see second reading come to the board, too. We shifted them around largely due to being cognizant of time for committee meetings. So nothing out of the ordinary or extraordinary, as it were. You know, if there's any conversation about individual policies or questions that you have, I'm more than happy to entertain those. Otherwise, like I said, second reading, so they've been around the horn at least once already.
Make a motion to approve board policy 422, admission of non-resident pupils, 423.1, part-time open enrollment, 443.2, rule bus conduct, and 453.4, rule medication administrative procedures, all for second reading.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve board policy 422, admission of non-resident pupils; 423.1, part-time open enrollment; 443.2, rule bus conduct; and 453.4, rule medication administration procedures, all for second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those are approved for second reading. Next item, update on the federal Every Student Succeeds Act school level reporting requirement.
was a presentation that was made in Milwaukee at the school board convention. I don't know if I saw anybody there. I attended-
convention or this-
You were there, right?
I was at convention, it wasn't at this.
You were okay. But even if you were there, I want to make sure the rest of the board also saw this presentation, but I removed about half the slides from this, so rather than being an hour, it'll just be an hour and a half, no. We'll try to move through it fairly quickly. As you all know,
I didn't think, my apologies. I thought I did AV mute and I must have turned it off.
okay,
Here it goes.
no, I think, anyway, I moved about half the slides and we'll try to get through this rather quickly. And then I have our district actual numbers, budget numbers that I'm going to go through with you. What it means is school districts are responsible for reporting the per pupil cost by school. DPI will then collect this information and send it on to the U.S. Department of Education. The first thing we need to do was in fall of 2018, we need to file a budget report by school level. That was completed December 14th, 2018. Later this summer, we'll be doing an actual report. And then in 2020, DPI will release it to the public, the actual report. Oh, okay, there we go. DPI, when they developed this reporting, worked with 38 other districts, other states, and 20 districts, and some experts from Georgetown University. And the key components of the information they're gathering is enrollment by building, which they already do. And then they want to gather the federal expenditures by building, the state and local costs by building, and they get a total per pupil total by building. There's some costs that can't be identified in the building, for instance, superintendent salary, business services department, HR department. All those kinds of costs that are not identifiable by building will be pulled together and then they'll be divided out to the buildings based on the school's enrollment. So that's the next section you see there, school share of district expenditures. That's right in the middle there. So you got a federal, you get a federal grant that's not identified by a building, divided out by the enrollment. So you get a total per pupil expenditures split out. You add that to the number above, and you get a total per pupil expenditure by building. Costs that are not going to be identified. There's some things that are excluded. Capital projects, community service expenditures, debt service payments, some equipment, food service that does not need to be reported on the school level, interfund transfers, and public choice tuition, and then trust funds. So all those are excluded items, and we just report the total excluded. Moving on. If there's any questions on going through this, please ask your questions at that point. The first information is the enrollment, which comes from our third Friday count, which we already have been reporting. And with the one exception, third Friday count is converted to a membership report. This count actually is a head count rather than membership. Okay, then the next category of expenditures, we have to split the expenditures based on federal, the state and local to each building that can be identifiable in each building. Moving on. The next section shows that any costs at district level are then split to buildings based on their enrollments. And the final slide here are these numbers. We get a total per pupil expenditure by building. Achievement, one more slide. Thank you. Achievement data has already been worked for 2 years by building. This is a new dimension. This is a new concept that we'll be getting expenditure information by building. While the two aren't linked together, people will try to link them together. Oh, that's the next slide. People are going to try to link this information together, even though it's not necessarily linked. And I'm going through this very quickly. If there's any questions, just please ask. So the question is, what does the board do and to understand this and prepare themselves with an answer? Like, ask questions about, you have this enrollment in this building, you're spending this much less than you are in some other building. And that's what we're about to do here. Next slide. So, you need to know your schools. You need to explain the numbers for each building or by building. Yeah. Yes, the public will try to compare the buildings, and so we need to be ready. They gave some samples, which I did keep in the presentation here, of one more slide. There we go. There's two schools, two school districts. One is spending $15,622 per pupil, and the other is spending $12,096 per pupil. One is meeting expectations, and one exceeds expectations. One is a smaller enrollment, one is a higher enrollment. They're in two different CSAs. One has a type of program, one does not. And they have different health insurance coverages programs. So based on that, there is an explanation for the reason one district has much higher cost per pupil than the other district. Other school, other building. Or when it's reported, most likely, all that's going to be reported is the dollar amount and the report card. And you won't see the other information. It's up to you to provide that additional information to explain the difference in numbers. On March 1 of this year, in a little over a month, a little less than a month, excuse me, DPI will be releasing this information to the public. The budget information that was filed in December. While DPI hasn't shown us what the numbers are yet, I tried to put together a preliminary report of what, based on the numbers reported to them, what it would look like, what it might look like. And that is the end of this presentation. Now we have the expenditure information that's actually submitted to DPI. It's on a gray sheet. You have a gray sheet in front of you?
Not blue.
Gray sheet.
Oh, great.
The box.
The ones that were given to us in the table.
Oh,
There we go. Okay. What I've listed there is each building, it shows the building code, and that's necessary to pull off the different information for that building. I show the grades in each of those buildings, and I show the membership. Actually, I should have done the student head count. What I actually show is the membership. So when DPI does come out with information, this may have to be modified. In the box is information that was submitted in December to DPI. We have a budget total by building. We have an exclusions from each building for food service and other costs. We have the federal number, and then we have the state and local number. What I've done is I've taken the total cost and I've subtracted the exclusions to come up with a total of $22,557,832. That number then is distributed to each of the buildings based on their enrollment. Next, we show the federal costs per student by building. First WC grant gets very little federal dollars. Grove, we get approximately $765 per student. Howe, $787 per student. And on down the list. But for local expenditures, you'll see the local expenditures that are budgeted in our budget by building. And then the next column, district-wide, is the total amount that cannot be identified by building, just allocated to each building based on their enrollment. So each building is picking up $4,554 of transportation costs, central office costs, all those costs that are not identified by building. And then you receive a total, you see a total there by building. And it's a number, but obviously people want to compare that number. And you'll notice that our three highest poverty schools, Grove, Howe, and Meade, we're spending a disproportionate amount. In other words, Meade, being the highest poverty school, it shows that we're spending less per student than we are at Grove, which has a lower poverty level than Meade does. And the same thing with Howe. The question is, why are we doing that? Are we really doing that? And that's the question that people are going to ask. Why are we spending less at Meade than we are per student than we are at Grove and Howe?
Less students.
Next sheet, take one. This will show you why that's really not the case. We actually have more resources at Meade than we do at Grove and Howe. What I did is I picked up off the gray sheet where you see the total for Grove, Howe, and Meade. I have it in a box there with a big sheet. And then I show the class, the FTE. Staff FTE, classroom staff FTE. This is not the total staff FTE. This is just classroom teacher FTE in each of those buildings. So we have 20 staff FTE at Meade, classroom FTE, teachers, Howe 17, and Grove 13. Then I looked at, this is also reported DPI by department, our staffing, salaries, and benefits. Pulling that off for each of those buildings for the classroom teachers, the average compensation per teacher for Grove is $92,549. That's salary and benefits. $96,214 for Howe, and it's $76,717 for Meade. Meade has a number of 6 or more new teachers in the last 2 years. Their salaries are much lower than the senior teachers who've been here for 30 years. Cost per student. Based on that, you'll see that Meade has a much lower cost per student for classroom teachers than the other 2 buildings, Grove and Howe. However, Meade's class sizes are smaller. They have the smallest class size of any of the buildings, elementary buildings. So the dollar amount spent is not the total story. We are putting resources at Meade. We're putting more staff at Meade than we are at the other buildings.
The other piece too that I would mention is just the fact that this is what we think the data is going to tell us. This is, our best guess at what this reporting is going to look like. We went through the process, Dan went through the process specifically to start to tease some of this out, provide you with some preemptive information. And in fact, today, we are having a conversation around what would develop these differences. I mean, we know our staff members have the same benefit level, benefit packages, if you're full-time, and we know many things are constant. But we know that class sizes are different, building sizes are different. We know that average tenure of staff in buildings can be different. And so that's the interesting piece that comes together to tell the story around what circumstances are. There's a litany of other ESSA reporting information that largely falls under Kathy and, of course, my purview with reference to some of these same pieces in a report sort of format that are not necessarily, they are in a sense correlated to the dollars and cents, but it's not a financial report. That would be like average age of staff, the tenure of teachers, how many, 3-year or less teachers are in the building, and some of these pieces that we've alluded to before. All of this is embargoed information until March 1st. This, however, not embargoed because, again, it's our best guess. This is what we think this report is potentially going to tell us. What I believe is that the reports are going to all come down kind of to a generalized, here's a comprehensive report under federal ESSA for Meade. Here's a and it's going to have a number of categories that are assigned to it. And then does that, at this stage, correlate to this state school report card? The answer to that question is no. Remember the slide, yet. Because the belief is that that's the direction the expectation is moving so that, it's a one-stop shop via a school report card sort of format. You can go through, look at how you are doing in state academic and, graduation rates and all these other indicators in addition to federal accountability measures through the SSA at some point down the road if these things kind of stay in place. So it makes sense to have these preemptive conversations around what we think things might look like. Other areas with reference to some of the ESSA accountability and reporting are so nebulous that we have some ideas around what they look like, and there's information that we're currently going through. That's in a portal called SAFE, a Secure Access File Exchange for administrators to review on the front end. But it's interesting. It's an interesting time moving forward, and I think it's a great time to have this conversation, particularly around resource allocation, because that's absolutely what it comes down to. Where you're spending, how are you spending your dollars and cents, and where are you spending them? And so it's a great time to have the conversation as we move into more and more accountability sort of conversations with community members, the public, friends, neighbors, relatives, and so forth.
After going through what you went through to understand the program, do you understand any more about why it was implemented?
No. No, it's just the federal part.
It's another unfunded.
Yes, I had an idea. I believe what they're trying to demonstrate is that and I don't know whether it applies to us so much as larger metropolitan areas, Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit. They want to get more equality between schools.
Right.
I think that's the goal.
So you have larger districts that, what's the end game? I don't know anybody really can tell you that or point to it, but frankly, like Dan indicated, you've got a school district that's got, one side of the tracks and the other side of the tracks. And, take 2 public high schools, for example, in one district. One is low performing as far as achievement data goes. It's high poverty, it's racially diverse and so forth. And then the other one is in the more affluent section. It's predominantly white, blah, blah, blah. Spending here is $10,000 per pupil. Spending here is $15,000 per pupil. And then how do you board square that? And that's another reason why engaging in some of these preemptive sort of conversations makes all kinds of sense. I would argue our data indicates that we are allocating funds in our most needy buildings and have some explanations as to why they may be off. And keep in mind, for those of you listening, if there are folks, we're talking like $60 per pupil, not hundreds or thousands of dollars in some of these delineations between buildings. If you go to our highest per pupil building to our expenditure to our lowest per pupil building expenditure, there's a discrepancy there, but that would be like a middle school versus an elementary and so forth. So some of these are much easier, more easily explained. In comparing our elementaries, by and large, there isn't gigantic or massive gaps in spending between them to the tune of $1,000 or $1,500 per pupil. But when we're talking about our highest need buildings, that gap is even smaller. So, the difference between Meade and Grove, for example, is less than $40. Well, pardon me, $41. You know what I'm saying, per pupil. So, putting these things in perspective when you're not evaluating the data, looking at it, I think is relevant as well. But that honestly is the point, Larry, so that people have an opportunity to look and say, well, yeah, this looks like what we're comfortable with, or it doesn't, or it's an ability to kind of reflect on what you have as a circumstance and identify some of those things. One thing that I would cite that is tossed around with regular frequency as well, you're comparing this 2 high school scenario once again. It's easier with 2 high schools because I think the comparison can be quite more, a little bit more stark versus 7 elementaries. You're only comparing one to the other. One high school might be able to garner some funds from its community via fundraising efforts to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, where the other can barely scrape together 10 grand. And how is that money invested? That doesn't show or come about via this data either. So there's a number of other community factors that come into play with reference to local circumstance that are taken into account in the actual spending on kids, because we all know there's other dollars that just state and local funding. I mean, there's also fundraisers and donations and all these other avenues that are engaged in. So anyway, long diatribe, but basically to say more to come on this topic. I think our preliminary financial data is favorable given current context. We'll see what it looks like when it comes to the official report from the federal government by virtue of the DPI. So.
The other part of that is that the 2 high schools, one might have 1,500 kids, one might have 2,500.
Correct.
Because that's because it's per building. It doesn't take account per student when you actually average them out what the actual students are getting. Yeah, so then you can't make a comparison until you hit that equilibrium to figure out where you're actually making a difference.
A lower enrollment school usually has higher cost per student than
Correct.
school, just because of the fixed costs there.
Pardon?
Kathy?
I was just going to add too that the law for Title I is that we supplement, not supplant. So we need to be spending more at those Title I buildings. So this is a really good reflection of how we've been doing it. We're not using our Title I to pay for regular classroom teachers. It is over and above. So we're meeting kids' needs. And so I think this is kind of a gold star for the district in that we are definitely following the law. And I don't know if that's part of what's motivating, the federal government in asking for this information, but I think we're doing what we need to be doing as far as those elementary schools go.
I would agree, it shows up in the numbers. Our highest need is our highest need. Interesting report, thank you. The next item, update on the development of the 1920 district budget.
Back to Dan.
There are, I believe you should have 2 additional handouts. One was the blue one that came in your board packet.
properly.
And the other one is a buff colored sheet that says on the second line, 2019-20 revenue limit worksheet. Buff or yellow?
How about the yellow one?
They don't have that one.
Oh, they don't have this one.
We got the yellow one that just came
I
tonight.
see it's the same numbers.
The yellow one, Dan, is the same as the
It's the
buff
same
sheet
numbers,
without-
okay.
without
Yours is
your-
yellow, mine is buff.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough.
Well, theirs doesn't have your handwriting on it with your notes.
The first one we're gonna look at is the blue one. Many years ago, like in prior to 1993, this was critical information for state aid. With the implementation of the revenue limit in 1993, it's of less importance to development of the budget, but it's very important to taxpayers because this is built into determination of what the tax levy will be. On the blue sheet, let's see, the first numbers you'll see are up in the upper right-hand corner, and it says guarantees for October 15th certification, K-12.
Your blue sheet's different, Dan. There it is. So you're on your second page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Left-hand corner, it says
Yes.
Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, October 15th certification, 1920 general aid.
Yes, that's
Now
the
you
sheet,
should
I'm
be seeing
sorry.
what Dan said.
Right. You got two sheets in your packet. The first one's been revised. The second one, the state aid, is still current. Well, the best we know at this point. Those are the factors that went into the state aid that we received this year. The next numbers off to the left there are your membership. That is off by one. The membership has been amended to actually 5,013. That's just a minor change. The rest of the numbers on that sheet reflect the budget for this year. So this represents aid we'll be getting next year. And then working all the way through the sheet, based on this year's numbers, our bottom line number on the bottom right-hand corner, $32,154,584. If these were the numbers, the final numbers that we report, then these are that's the guarantees that we receive, that would be our state aid. Neither one of those are going to happen. Our budget numbers are not going to be our actual numbers. There's going to be some difference. And the guarantees are not going to be, the guarantees this year are not going to be the guarantees next year. But that's all we have at this point. It brings in a state general aid of $643,000 less than we received this year. If these numbers, if I'm guessing the guarantees will actually increase, and so that my $32 million figure will actually increase. But at this point, these are the numbers that make up the computation of the state aid this year. Moving that number forward to the revenue limit worksheet, which is the yellow one. That number shows up on the right-hand side, line 12A. It's right in the middle of the sheet. Okay, $32,154,000.
It says October 15th aid
So
certification.
that number rolls forward. Now I'm going to go through this sheet. Up on the top, they show the revenue limit from last year. They pull out our non-recurring exemption. The number you see there on line, it doesn't have a line number. It's the second to last in that little box at the top on the left-hand side, $5,330,892. Most of that is for the revenue limit exemption for our energy projects. In fact, almost 100% of it is. That number gets subtracted out, and then that $50,946 goes to the top. Begin the calculation for this year. Right, continuing on down, September and summer FTE membership averages. It takes a 3-year rolling average. This is the first time since I've been in the district we have not had a declining enrollment exemption. When I got here in 2000, we had a declining enrollment exemption. We've had one ever since for 18 years. This is the first time our enrollment has gone up over a 3-year period in that period of time.
Dan,
However,
could I stop you there a second? Because one of the things that they talked about in the budget that he was just doing is moving that to a 5-year rolling average to help school districts.
then our average will still go down because we had bigger decreases in the prior 2 years prior to this.
But that was one of the conversations.
I
that they had.
doubt they'll implement that for this year because that would be a big change. They have to recalculate a lot of different things to do that. But barring that change, our enrollment actually increased over the last 3 years, or will, if we have projected enrollments next year. Now, this is based on our next fall's enrollment September count.
Which we haven't done yet.
Pardon?
Which we haven't done yet.
But we know what the number is. I put it out there. It's going to be the same number we had this year.
Yeah.
So if you look on, let's see, they don't have the online number, but it says, line 6. You see the box right below line 6. You see 4,961, 4,994, which was this year's, and then 4,994 again next year. I'm projecting that we'll have the same enrollment next year as we have this year. That gives us an average enrollment for the 3-year period of 4,983, which is higher than the prior 3-year average. First time it's happened in 19 years. But the sad news about that is that we lose our declining enrollment exemption, which was a significant amount of money. And you'll see as we work through this formula, our revenue limit is going down now because we lost that declining enrollment exemption. Moving up to the top right-hand side, line 4A, allowed for member change. I haven't heard a lot about, and we're talking about increasing our revenue limit. They've talked about our per pupil allocation, what's it called, per pupil categorical aid. But there hasn't been a lot of discussion about what the revenue limit might look like. I put nothing in there. Years ago, many years ago, 10 years ago, we were supposed to get like $200 every year. That didn't happen. But that was a nice thought, but it really didn't happen.
Some years it was over that, 246, 254.
Oh, no, some years it was over, yeah. But lately it hasn't been there. It's
Zero.
become more as a per pupil categorically. So right now I'm showing 0. Moving on down, the next number that's of any significant, well, I should say, if you look at line 10, and then C is our levy for the energy exemption projects that we're doing for next year. Dropping down to H is the private school voucher amount that we levy to
And that
send the DPI, who sends it.
$1.3 million.
That's a projection.
That's a projection. Last year it increased $900,000, something like $906,000.
Yeah, just over $1 million.
This year, I thought, I put in a $365,379. Whether it'll increase that amount, I don't know. Could be more than that, yeah. Could be less than that, hopefully. Okay, I don't know. But I just made, I increased the amount by half of what it went up last year, a little less than half. We'll see. Continuing on down, off on the right-hand side, I have some comparisons to this year's revenue limit. I'm just comparing it to next year. What I'm projecting is next year's revenue limit. Right now, I'm projecting that our revenue limit will be $1,468,000 less than it was this year.
That's through the declining enrollment.
Losing the declining enrollment exemption is a big part. And not having an increase in the per member increase there. If the legislature is able to put some money there, that would change that number. Based on that, we'd have a total revenue limit of $22,349,258. And I'll show us that we'd levy that amount. I also have, continuing down to line 15, I have $1,871,302 for debt service, community service $240,000, and prior levy chargeback. That's where unpaid property taxes that are charged back to the district, and we re-levy for those, is $4,000. And that's just based on historical numbers. So we end up with a total revenue limit, total tax levy of $464,560. How does that compare? That's $365,379 higher than our levy this year, which happens to be the exact same number I'm using for the private school voucher program. The board doesn't have to levy for that. I'm showing that you do, that you will. That's your decision. The other numbers of significance there, I put a box in there right above that black bar. It says total available for debt defeasance. This is another amount that you don't have to levy, but it would reduce our debt service going forward. So there's a $1,640,000 there available for debt defeasance. Years ago, we borrowed QZAB money to replace boilers at Mead, Grove, Howe. Those were and the Pitch. Those are the buildings eligible for QZAB. And there's no interest on that money. But we've been putting money away into an escrow account every year, $150,000 every year since we borrowed that money. In my projections, because of our low interest rates for the past quite a few years now, we're not going to have enough deposits plus interest to cover the bond payment when it comes due in 4 years. I did a projection, and if we deposited the entire amount that's left to be deposited, $600,012. You see that in italics, little small print there. Based on our current interest rates, we would come very close to covering the entire amount we need to make that payment. Otherwise, we just have to levy for it at that point in time.
What's the due date?
The due date is December 5th, 2022. So So we use $600,000 for that, put that into the escrow account. I think we've come very close to covering the total payment when it comes due. The rest could be used to defease the money we borrowed in 2012, I believe. 12, I believe it was. And that's one thing, that's a possibility what you could do with those funds. The other possibility is you could modify the tax levy. You could use those funds to modify the tax levy. And that takes us through our projection on our revenue limit for next year. Any questions?
One of the key things that we need to keep in mind that if we don't levy for that voucher money, we lose that amount of money.
Yes, that's correct.
So we have to levy for that money, otherwise, as we go forward, we're actually impacting our budget as we go forward.
Right.
If we don't levy for that money.
Right.
So it's important for the public to know that that has to be paid one way or the other.
They take it out of our state aid.
Right.
The DPI
Right.
is required to move it from state aid.
So it's got to be understood that if you don't levy for that, then you lose it, and then you're actually putting your district behind the eight ball every time you do that.
The final thing worth pointing out before we move on is the fact that this is based on what we know now. As you know, the state is going to engage or is engaged in a budget development process for the 1921 biennium. And we may not see a budget, we may see a budget, you never know. So then, of course, that's what the references are. These are all projections. Pupil count is not done until next September. Our certified state aid amount does not come until October 15th of next, of 2019, so that's down the road. And of course, what the budget looks like, nobody technically knows right now. So this is based off of everything we know now. If nothing changed, this would be casting forward, which is the only available data that we have access to.
And unless something changes between now and June, these are probably the numbers, close to the numbers we'd be using in the budget adoption.
Yeah.
Unless we know some information changes.
There's been budget development cycles where districts and municipalities weren't notified till quite late in the year, August-ish. And so we'll see. I mean, this might be a unique approach, but we'll have money. We just don't know in what form it'll come and how much it'll be.
Thanks for the update, Dan, the report. Next item on our agenda is update on board member participation in the 2019 State Education.
I'll jump in first. Part of it was the legislative, when we did through it and went through, I don't know, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just about everything that was requested to be done passed. So the delegate assembly passed all that, and that's being taken forward, and the final copy is now available on the WASB website as far as the final form of all of the changes and everything else. So that came out today. So if anybody wants to look at the resolutions and what Dan and I think this is the other gentleman's name, our two advocates for that take stuff forward on our behalf are going to use this information to take it forward.
Chris is there.
Yes, thank you. And we did Sandy and I did a pre-seminar meeting with, and it was about breaking the iron cage of poverty. And it was a real interesting presentation because it's based on, she's now a doctor, Donna Beal, who was living in poverty. And she basically talks about how kids in poverty don't know any different and don't know the language that middle-class kids know. So part of the disconnect that when they're in poverty and what they see and what they talk about and what they learn isn't passed on, and a lot of people don't realize that, but they look at us as outsiders, just like people in the middle class would look at them as outsiders as far as education and everything else. So she talked about the causes of poverty, where the beliefs come from, as far as your parents, your environment, your community, media, personal experience, your experiences and exposures to opportunities while growing up. It was things that we just didn't ever even thought. Some of the stuff I never even thought about. And we didn't put two and two together and equal before. When she said that there were certain things that when she stopped going to school in 8th grade, I believe.
She dropped out of 9th grade, freshman.
She was pregnant at 13 with her first child. Because that's what they did. That was their society, and that was what they did in their world. So what she did, her biggest goal was to be a mom. That was her biggest goal when she was growing up. So, and then she talked about the people, the iron cage, but she talked about the people that were strong in her life, and one of them was her mom. Her dad wasn't always present. It was just an interesting perception that a lot of people don't think about. And when you talk about homelessness and the fact that in our district we have 370
this year.
170 this year of homeless people that you don't even think about.
But her big thing was generational poverty. This is poverty that has gone on generation after generation after generation, and they know no different. And, you think, what do we think of them? They're lazy. No, they're probably working 3 or 4 jobs, but they're minimal salary, and they're just not making ends meet. She went back to school when she was 26, got her GED, and in 10 years she had her doctorate. So she was pretty smart.
There's the types of poverty she was talking about. Generational is what she was talking about. Working class poverty, immigrant poverty, and situational poverty. So those are all different types of poverty that people have to look at. And her biggest thing as far as trying to help that is getting people involved, business, community, everything, anybody you can think of, try to get them involved and help them break the poverty cycles of these places. The next thing that I went to was a thing about stress on teachers, which kind of affected me because my wife had some stress issues a couple years back. And it was a presentation that it really didn't give you a lot of answers, but it gave you some causes. The bigger problem with stress with teachers can be in smaller districts because they're feeling the crunch and pressure of not only having to teach, but also do the career and tech ed stuff, the ACP stuff, because they don't have counselors, they don't have, so I mean, these teachers are being, not only do they have to teach the kids, but then they have all of these other hats to wear, and it's getting more frustrating for these teachers and more pressure and stress on them because now they really want to teach the kids, but they're not, because of mandates and all of the other unfunded things that the state and federal government, which we just heard some of the stuff, many of these things aren't funded. Bigger districts have people that can help do this stuff, administration team, and have bigger business services departments. When you get to the smaller districts, they don't have the people to do that. So it falls on their superintendent, their administrators, and then the stuff that some of the administrators are supposed to be doing, it goes down to the teachers, and it just kind of, it keeps going downhill, and that's where the frustration and the stress is becoming more prevalent. And it was more of just kind of trying to understand what was going on, and there weren't really a lot of answers, but it is frustrating for a lot of the teachers when you talk to them like that. Just don't have time to teach kids. And it's sad because that's where we want our teachers, because I wouldn't be here today with all the teachers that I have. And they didn't have anywhere near the mandates and stuff that we have, and they were able to do a lot of that. And then my wife, who retired last year, was sitting there looking at all these snow days, and she said, I'd be sitting here trying to figure out my schedule on how I'm going to get this stuff taught in my math class while they're at this snow day. Teachers may be off, but they're not stopping their work because they still have to figure out, now we've just lost 4 days of school. I've got to figure out how to get section 2.3 of my math unit through these teachers. So, I mean, stress is prevalent, and we are addressing it as we've talked in some of the committee meetings that we, and Kathy does a very good job with professional development and all of the other stuff. but we do have to be cognitive of it, that it's becoming a burnout position, and with all the other factors, teachers are leaving for the business because they just don't want to deal with it.
Are you done? I mean,
Yeah,
okay,
go
because
ahead.
I went to a couple of them. I really liked the Wednesday keynote speaker, and I won't talk about him because I have something else that was more important. But, and I also did go to one, DC Everest, Chris Gilmore, the superintendent had it. She was supposed to have, it was on safety, and I think Marine was with me. They talked about that, and the one thing I noticed is that we're doing pretty much what they're doing. But she didn't have the people from her district come because the weather was so bad, so she had to do the whole presentation herself. But that was really good. But the one that really really hit me, and it goes along with John's, but it wasn't stress. It was called Teacher Mental Health and Why It Matters. And I know Sandy and Ann were in there too. And the counselor that gave it was from Lake Holcomb. And I would have shared the PowerPoint with you, but I had to use magnifying glass to read it. But I actually wrote a report because I really think it's something that we need to address as a board. And I talked to Craig about it too because, I've been, and I know I mentioned it at personnel, I've been going into the classrooms where my grandson goes to school, and for 3 years now, helping weekly reading with kids. And last year, reading with 2 different classes because the teachers, there's so much stress, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and they're getting more and more and more. They're having to do more and more. And I really think it's something, we talk about going to meet with our legislators. We do that, we've been doing that for 18 years, and we talk to them, and they talk to us. I think we maybe need to talk a little differently to them. I don't know about taking them into the classrooms, because if you would go there on any given day, you might go to the wrong classroom. It's not like that, every classroom has it every day, but I really think there's really important things we need to address. So I'm just going to read this to you because I wrote from the PowerPoint, and there's data and surveys, and they're all referenced in the PowerPoint. So if anybody wants to see it, they can. So this session was about the mental health of our schools educators. Research shows teaching has become one of the most stressful occupations in the nation, which is affecting burnout, lack of engagement, job dissatisfaction, job performance, some of the highest turnover rates ever. Novice and experienced alike are being driven out of the profession. Data from national studies and the 2017 Wisconsin Educator Survey indicate that the reason teachers are leaving has less to do with the insufficient pay and more to do with school climate and teacher voice. And like I said, for the past 3 years I've been volunteering at Grant, and I'm seeing firsthand what they're dealing with on a daily basis. I've been a parent with kids in school for 40 years. My oldest is going to be 45 this month. And I've seen drastic changes in education. And I think the most significant is the lack of respect in society. I really think that has a big part of what's going on. Whether people supported it or not, Act 10 caused a lot of mistrust. Schools are expected to do more with less, yet challenges continue to rise. The breakout session gets to many of the issues I've seen develop and increase in our schools over the years. More staff is needed in classrooms with all of the demands on teachers to perform according to district, state, and federal guidelines. And I really think there's a need to look at doing things differently in education. I don't have any answers, but I think it would be a good workshop sometime to really sit down and include the teachers, because they're really the ones that are at the forefront of it. Demands are great on everybody: students, staff, families, boards. So 2017 data from this was the Annie Casey Foundation and Wisconsin Office on Children's Mental Health indicates that for 9 to 17-year-olds, 1 in 10 have a diagnosable mental health issue. 1 in 4 have experienced depression, and 1 in 7 have seriously considered suicide. Some results that have manifested include bullying, depression, drugs, anxiety, and suicide. And teachers aren't immune to mental health concerns. A study from Penn State and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in 2014 found that 46% of teachers report high daily stress during the year. And also, jobs of principals are becoming more complex and stressful. 75% feel the job has become very complex. 69% say the job responsibilities are very different from 5 years ago. and 48% feel they are under great stress several days a week. In 2016, a survey of 3,300 teachers conducted by the Center for Education Policy, George Washington University, was conducted. And what the survey revealed is that 68% of teachers go into the profession to make a difference in the lives of students, and less than 1% go into the profession for earning potential. The survey also indicated that the greatest challenge for teachers have to do with state or district policies that get in the way of teaching, constantly changing demands placed on teachers and students, managing student behavior, and addressing the needs of economically disadvantaged students. Forces outside of teachers' control may be taxing their goodwill and dedication. Half or more have indicated decreased enthusiasm, high stress, and a desire to leave the profession. Teachers are likely to stay in the profession when they feel they are being heard. The Wisconsin Educator Survey asked administrators and teachers if they have ever given serious thought to leaving their school district. Over 64.1% indicated that they have. And some of the factors that impacted teacher mental health was a lack of decision-making, feeling overwhelmed, climate, student behavior, and lack of support. Negative consequences of teacher stresses: highly stressed teachers are less effective in the classroom. It leads to teacher turnover and financial additional costs to the district. And turnover affects students' math and language arts score. So what can be done? They said some self-help by teachers, such as adjusting diet, exercise, relaxing techniques, and developing a support network might be helpful, but self-care can't fix everything. Educator stress and mental health need to be addressed systematically. Sources of stress come from the lack of strong principal leadership, a healthy school climate, and a collegial supportive environment. One of the solutions they called was strategic abandonment, and that was to go down the list of initiatives and choose which are our top priorities to keep strategically abandon, and then strategically abandon the other ones. And the last was to increase autonomy and decision-making by recognizing educators as professionals, give staff leadership roles, provide avenue for teacher voice, provide mentor programs, implement student social emotional learning, and promote a healthy school climate. I mean, I really think some of these things should be talked about, because I don't think things are going to change. I don't think all the resolutions we make for talking points to the legislators, I haven't seen in the 18 years where it's made a difference. That point. I hope it's something we can, sometime have a workshop on.
I heard one of the, I think, most inspiring guest speakers this year compared to some other years, Steve Pemberton. He was, I don't want to give the whole thing because some people are still reading the book here that don't know what some of the endings are. But he was product of a biracial family. Dad didn't know who his dad was. He came into a foster care with an African-American family, which just treated him. If you ever read the book, The Boy Called It, he was in that same predicament, just beaten. And what happened was he learned to read. A neighbor saw him, gave him books. He was an avid reader. Finally, he got out. He found a mentor. And his big thing was to go to the university. And he made it at the university. And he became very successful. CEOs of some large major corporations. And you think, well, anybody can do this, but I think he had a very special IQ. But it's just very inspirational, and the book is Not a Chance in the World, and that's what somebody said to him. That kid doesn't have a chance in the world, and he just proved them wrong. And he goes on to find out about his mother, find out about his father, connects with brothers and sisters that he didn't know he had, and it's quite a story. I think you'd really enjoy reading it. It's quite eye-opening. And he's a wonderful speaker.
And he has his own family, then he has a wife and children.
Yeah.
It was,
And the wife and children, his family, he said were, his proudest.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all that he needs in this world, is to have his own family and have them be so successful. And good looking, too. Because we saw a picture. I actually got very sick, and I've not been that sick in 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. So that's what I was going to talk about with Steve Pemberton too, because that's about, that's about what I remember. That's that session.
It was a good convention.
Yeah, but I also remember your session, and I know that you were very brought up about that, so.
It really does. I think it's something that we need to talk about.
Absolutely. And the one last session, I know Craig and I went both to, it was given by Dan and Chris about the budget and Tony Evers' thoughts and the legislature's thoughts. And he has the pie in the sky, they have the, well, wait, hold it back, type of thing. There are, basically, the long and the short was they have some common ground that they both agree with. Part of that was with the Blue Ribbon Committee. What they were talking about as far as where the actual money and where they agree within the budget, that's probably going to be a struggle. So they are a little bit optimistic, but it's very cautiously optimistic on what might happen with the budget process. Being that it's Republican control both houses and Democratic governments. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if they can work together. And there was some good threads of common ground, which kind of made you feel a little better that there's things that might come. It's just the dollar amounts where they end up being in regards to what we actually see based on Dan's presentation tonight. The money we see to fill it out and then hopefully increase that budget number in the deficit to bring it more to people.
I went to some other, the Blue Ribbon Commission, and kind of give an oversight on that. And Luther Olson was there and Representative Kitchens. And they were told, think out of the box, da-da-da. And it came down to it, but don't expect any on most of this. You're probably not going to get all this. So much of the Blue Ribbon Commission, we'll see what we get.
As far as an encapsulation goes, I would say, I would echo some of the sentiment because Steve Pemberton is his name. He spoke for almost 90 minutes, I think 80-ish minutes. And there was not a time where you weren't like, what's this guy going to say next? And for me, I'm as squirrely as can be. To sit there and listen to somebody talk for 80 minutes is an outlier for me. This guy is outstanding, aside from his life story. I'm not quite sure what it is, but his ability to speak and the engagement that he spoke with was almost unmatched. If you ever see or hear of Steve Pemberton, spend the time, pay for the ticket or whatever, go listen to this guy talk because he was outstanding. The second thing I would mention is with reference to Mary's point, and that is, I do think it's time that we as organizations, in public schools in particular, evaluate in a reasonable fashion what we have control over and what we do not have control over, and have some critical conversations around with what we have control over, is this necessary? Are the things that we're asking people to do or the things we're engaged in currently, is this necessary? Is this meet our end goal of student achievement or helping kids become better human beings, whatever the case may be? And I think where we find that the answer to that question might be a little bit too indirect, or it might be, I get the value in this, but really what it's doing is causing more issues for our staff members. That makes all kinds of sense. And the issue is also engaging in that process in a meaningful fashion, because this doesn't mean that we simply divest ourselves of all of the things that we've got going, that we can humanly, but it does allow us to be cognizant and critical of what specifically we're asking people to do and be reflective about whether or not is this really the benefit that we, all the best intentions have unintended consequences. And I think we are at a point, because of societal changes, because of unfunded and funded mandates from the federal government and the state, and all of these competing factors that we talk about that come into schools because we're a people business. What do we legitimately have control over as an organization, and what can we do for our people? And having those conversations and involving staff in those conversations and hearing people out and slowly and incrementally making modifications makes all kinds of sense. And that is absolutely something that we need to do sooner than later, in my opinion, because you can see it.
Well, and I think with the mental health grant that's in the schools now and that they're promoting, I think it kind of all goes together.
Absolutely.
Good, thank you for the reports. Looking at the calendar, I'm assuming that because school's canceled tomorrow, that the CII meeting and the Student Wellness Committee meeting are probably canceled as well.
That's correct.
We'll have to reschedule.
Okay. And then we have an Insurance Committee meeting on the 25th, as well as the Friend of Education concert at the PAC at 7 p.m. And that puts us out into March for our committee meetings. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.